One of Watkins' most long-standing customers. I've been coming here for many years, since 1969, and I actually worked here for a year, and I knew Mr. Watkins too. And this is the second book that I've been privileged to present here, so I'm very grateful to Watkins for allowing me to do that. I'm going to begin with a sentence which I use by way of an invocation, a sort of blessing for the book. And you need to listen quite carefully really to get it. It's a fragment of spiritual advice which was offered nearly 100 years ago in Greece on the monastic peninsula of Mount Athos. It goes as follows: "Keep thy mind in hell and despair not." This sentence was written by a monk on Mount Athos, and he followed it up with another passage which I quoted at the beginning of the book, which goes as follows: "If the kings and rulers of the nations knew the love of God, they would never make war. War comes to us for our sins, not because of our love. The Lord created us in his love and bade us live in love and glorify him. If those in high places kept the commandments of the Lord and we obeyed them in humility, there would be a great peace and gladness on earth, whereas now the whole universe travails because of the ambition for power and the lawlessness of the proud." And this was written by Staret Siloan, who was a monk on Mount Athos until he died in 1938. And it's a salutary commentary on international affairs, and it's about as true now as it was then. The keynote of what he has written is this sentence: "Keep thy mind in hell and despair not." What this means in essence, as far as I can see, is you don't turn aside from what you discover within yourself, the good, the bad and the indifferent. You stay present to your experience. If you're faithful to what you find in yourselves, then a door to reality opens within you, and a deeper quality emerges which enables you to see life in a new way. Then it's possible that the title of this book begins to have a little bit more meaning: Meeting Evil with Mercy. To know what it means, you need to have been touched by mercy yourself. You need to know what love is and to have been touched by mercy. Then you can begin to meet the darkness, not only within yourself but in the world as well. Fundamentally, this is not really an outer directive so much as an inner directive, because meeting evil with mercy begins with each one of us in our own space, our own inward space. We need to find our own centre and flow out from a place of stillness to the world. The book is, on the face of it, is a biography of an Anglican priest called Martin Israel. I knew Martin personally. He married my wife and I at his church just near the Albert Hall in 1980. He was born in South Africa. He trained as a medical doctor and came to England in the early 1950s. And he converted to Christianity. He was Jewish, but he converted to Christianity in around about 1975. 1974, he became a priest in 1975. And I met him in 1979 and stayed in touch with him after we were married. He died in 2007. The last 10 years of his life he was suffering from Parkinson's disease, very, very disabled. He was not only a doctor and a priest. When he was a priest in London, he was also an exorcist, believe it or not. He was the exorcist for the London diocese, so he knew what evil was. It's important to understand that evil is not something that is absolute. It is a relative truth, but it's true enough on its own level, as we all know from the terrible events of the last few years. Even this time last week, on Nice seafront, yet another atrocity occurred. While I was writing this book, in the course of writing this book, one atrocity after another occurred, the attacks in Paris and then the attacks in Brussels. What we find are the keynotes of Martin Israel's teaching is the sanctity of life and the sacrament of the present moment. So the foundation of spirituality is a recognition of the sacred nature of life. From this recognition, quite naturally, flows the ability to see life as a sacrament. And you begin to see life in its totality, but the whole of your experience becomes sacred. It's not just going to church. And those elements are key to Martin's teaching. And then also the recognition of the primacy of love, because you cannot face darkness, you can't contend with what we call evil unless you've experienced love within yourself, which the love removes fear, and then you can face up to what you find in yourself, and you can face up to what you find in the world. I need to tell you a little bit about the background, how I came to hear of Martin Israel. Originally, the first spiritual influence in my life was Ramana Maharshi, the teachings, Indian teachings of Advaita. I was not inspired by Christianity when I was at school, and was drawn to Eastern philosophy and travelled to India and lived there for 4 years. When I was there, I was staying at Sri Ramanashram at Arunachala in Tamil Nadu, and I was given the task of looking after the library, the ashram library, and there I came upon a spiritual magazine, a monthly Christian magazine called The Science of Thought Review, and I found that it was published just a few miles from where my father lived in West Sussex. And I made contact with the editor of this magazine, and she invited me to write for her magazine. And then in 2013, my first book was published, called The Hidden Beauty of the Commonplace, which is a sort of it's a companion volume to this book. And Martin Israel was a friend of Claire Cameron, who was the subject of the book Hidden Beauty of the Commonplace. I worked for the publisher of Claire Cameron's books, and while I was working for him, I was asked to prepare a book of her editorials, and I asked Martin to contribute forward to this. And in this way, I came into touch with Martin Israel. The essence of his teaching, as I indicated at the beginning, is that no aspect of our experience need to be disregarded. everything is grist for the mill, both the light and the dark, positive and negative. He spoke very much about the healing power of pain. We learn far more in our lives from adversity than we do from the positive aspects of our experience. The real learning takes place, in the midst of our difficulties. And it's a strange enigma, but this is so. So, what we need to feel, what we need to discover is that each one of us is responsible for this condition of the world. We belong to the world. We have our origin in a place that is deeper than human experience. All our doing is founded on being, and so it's really important to discover this sense of background being from which all our activities flow. An important discovery is the ability to be grateful for all aspects of experience, whether easy or difficult. To give thanks is a very important aspect of authentic spirituality. So this book can be seen on different levels. On the one hand, it's a description of Martin Israel's life. Secondly, it is an exposition of his teachings. He was a prolific author himself. He wrote over 20 books. And so this book is a synthesis of a compilation of his teachings, and every chapter begins with a quotation from his writings. And I weave into the writing my own experience, my own encounter with difficulties. So it's a blend of my experience, Martin's teachings, and against the writing of the book is this the backdrop of our current international situation. Courage and loving kindness by all people of goodwill to enable them to confront the full fury of their inner demons too. But it is vital that this is attempted, since to pacify these dark energies is to calm the outer world, in which they find eventual expression in the violence that we see all about us. That really is the essence, the essential message of this book. If anybody would like to ask any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. In the intermediate realms of experience, that means not really on this earth as such, but in the psychic levels, and evil is expressed through human agents in the world. It finds expression through, each one of us is a channel for energies. And when Martin worked as an exorcist, he was extremely psychic, and he was aware of the influences which were brought to bear in individual circumstances. He could tell whether somebody was mentally ill, whether they were subject to something like epilepsy, or whether there was a genuine influence, a dark influence which was influencing them, whether they indeed were possessed in the sense of being a channel for a malevolent, or what is regarded as a malevolent or dark influence. And he used to find that this was quite rare, in fact. A lot of the examples of so-called possession he found weren't genuinely possession. They were often due to mental illness. But that's not to say that he wasn't well aware of genuine cases as well, and he describes in his books, he describes many situations in great detail where he came across people who were possessed by discarnate entities. And so, you know, what was remarkable about Martin was that he had this quality of discernment. He was highly psychic, but he you know, met these influences with a deeper understanding. He understood, you know, the fundamental nature of our experience, that we are founded, you know, all of us are founded on consciousness. We're founded on a deeper reality. If you become aware of this deeper element within yourself, then you're not subject to malevolent influence. You're not. He believed strongly in the power of prayer, and he believed in the protective influence of the Holy Spirit, and he invoked the Holy Spirit in his work, not only as a priest in his pastoral work and his inspired preaching. He was an extremely inspired preacher. He speaks on one occasion where he was actually having to contend while he was giving a sermon one Easter. He was having to contend with the fact that he felt possessed by an evil influence which had sort of invaded him, and he was having to continue with his sermon even in the midst of this experience.
How common a condition would it be though? I mean, if I were an exorcist at a local church in London, how many people might present themselves claiming that they were in a condition of possession?
I'm not an exorcist. I don't know the real answer to that, but I imagine that it's a question of degree, and I would think that the examples of full possession are pretty unusual. No, but a lot of people are unconsciously channeling negative energies. You know, each time one of us gives in to negativity, we begin to become vehicle for, you know, negative energies, and we have a responsibility in the way we live our lives. Integrity is very important. There is no need to fear evil when you understand that at its heart life is good. I do not believe personally in original sin. I believe in original goodness. Each one of us finds our origin in purity of consciousness. When you begin to understand that, then your attitude towards outer situations changes. You see things quite differently. You begin to look deeper at appearances, dark appearances. So when you're faced with, you know, the news, the bad news on a daily basis, you begin to see it quite differently when you're coming from a place of love and a place of clarity. Israel was still in South Africa. He was around about the age of 16. He was still at school. He had a profound mystical experience when he was in his bedroom one evening listening to music. An experience of total transcendence. Sort of the whole nature of reality was revealed to him. This was a foundation experience which he was never effaced from his consciousness. It was the foundation of his ministry of healing, really. But it's important, another aspect of Martin Israel is important to understand. He was not spared, the experiences that all of us have to go through. He suffered from severe depression throughout his life, and despite his great spiritual gifts, he was never completely free of depression. So he knew what darkness was, he knew what depression was, and so this made him a wonderful spiritual counselor. I finished this book with a chapter about joy, because when you're talking all the time about evil, it's quite possible to forget the positive side of spirituality. And joy is something which comes to a person as they go deeper. The amazing thing is that joy prevails even when circumstances are threatening and failure seems certain to crown all our efforts. Even if this world were to go up in smoke, joy would not end. Martin assures us of that. The reason for this, he said, is that joy is of a different order of excellence from pleasure or even happiness, both of which depend on material well-being and are related to circumstances. It is obviously hard to be happy when one is ill, in financial distress, or surrounded by social turmoil or political upheaval. The intention of counselling is to set before each person the basic truth of his own being, that God lies within him, and consequently he is no longer fully dependent on outer help. Authentic guidance such as Martin Israel offered does not so much dispose of problems, but transfigures them in the light of good counsel and love to a radiance of universal health. The emergence of joy is like the slow advent of the rising sun on a distant horizon. It starts as a delicate, suffused glow that seems gradually to gain the courage of momentum until its light fully heralds the dawn of a new day. This joy is a confirmation of a faith made real by God's mighty healing act and fully established in a life of health. That really sums his teaching up in a positive way. The so-called wiles of the devil, the subtlety, the different ways in which, the evil one can deceive, in a subtle way, not necessarily in an obvious way. But he did believe that human beings can be the agents of evil, and in the same way as full-blown anger can emerge from, in the first instance, it can start off as just irritability, but if you go the whole way, it becomes full-blown anger. It's a question of degree. Martin, I write here about some of these things. I say Martin would stress that in the normal way of things, there's absolutely no need to struggle or stand guard against malevolent forces. Our very best protection from all unwelcome influences is our native common sense and the natural healthy functioning of a balanced mind. Evil, as he would often point out, is actually an imbalance, an aberration or departure from what is real. Ultimately, there is only the good, and all is well. That is the highest truth. But if ever in doubt about this, he would ask his readers to remember the following. Avoid duplicity at all times and at any cost, since it opens the door to negativity and gives rise to all manner of complications. Be firm with falsehood, sly offspring of the most forbidding family of ill repute, and never be tempted to collude with it, for it will run rings around you and soon entangle you in its web of deceit. Instead, stand straight, step back, and simply witness its subterfuge. It will never vanquish you then. So it's a question of discernment. There's no need to shrink back before the powers of darkness because they find their true origin in light. If ever you feel adversely affected by baleful influences, above all, never seek to cast them out, but instead include them in your love, as that is what they truly long for, and therein also lies your greatest safety. This is actually the essence of the ministry of deliverance, in which aberrant elements of unredeemed evil are committed for safekeeping into the merciful hands of God. When he was growing up in South Africa, he was brought up in a Jewish family, and they had African servants. And one of the servants was a native girl who was a Christian. And she showed Martin, when he was a small boy, a Christian tract. And from this missionary tract, he discovered, the fact that someone called Jesus Christ lived, and it made an immense impact upon him. And then followed this mystical experience, and then when he came to England, he just became increasingly drawn to Christianity. But before he became drawn to Christianity, he looked into all the other great faiths, all the world religions. He was an advocate of the perennial philosophy, so he looked into Indian teachings, and as you know, he was well aware of Ramana Maharshi himself, and he used to preach from the pulpit at his church near the Albert Hall. He used to mention Ramana Maharshi's teaching from the pulpit. And that was one of the things that...
The church never gave him any trouble from that point of view?
I don't think they gave him any trouble. I think he was given a free hand. And in fact, when he was priest in charge of Holy Trinity Church in Prince Consort Road, just near the Albert Hall, the congregation grew steadily bigger and bigger, because his reputation as an inspired preacher spread far and wide. And so he became over a period of 30 years, he became very well known in London. We used to attend his services quite often. And it was one of the things that convinced me. It was Martin's influence that sort of brought me back to a deeper understanding of Christianity. Writing this book was a real education, because for the first time I began to understand what the deeper implications of Christianity was. Well, I suppose in a sense I am a Christian, but I think it's very important to make one point about Martin Israel. His outlook was truly universal. So he expressed himself in Christian language and Christian terminology, but he was a mystic, and he appreciated the essence at the heart of all the great world religions. So I think maybe I'm also of a mystical disposition. So I think it's true to say that I am a Christian, but I appreciate the truth at the heart of all the religions. I studied Buddhism to some extent, and also Sufism and Hinduism, and more recently Christianity.
I was just wondering, taking that point, I mean, could you explain the difference between Allah, this God that is being invoked by these religious fanatics in their attacks against the West, or against the Yazidis, and the Christian idea? I mean, are they different, or are they at the end of the day the same?
Well, reality, there are many different ways of naming reality. You can call reality God, or you can call it reality. You can call it reality. You can call it Allah. Or you can call it Brahman. These are all different ways of referring to one and the same thing. The supreme power. What is it, that brought each one of us into being? What created us? Where do we find what, by what mysterious power do we have our own life? What is the creator? It has no name really. It has the name which you care to give it. So the difficulty is that people get bogged down by terminology, by creed, and become, fixed in narrow views, and division and hatred stems from intolerance and the failure to understand that there is only one truth, there's only one reality. And out of this misunderstanding stems, all the evil of the world and all the religious intolerance, the bigotry, fanaticism, and in the end, the atrocities we witness in outer life are the outcome of ignorance, fundamentally. It's easily said, but each one of us has to discover this from our own experience. Does that answer your question?
Well, I mean, it does to an extent, only that I'm a bit confused if you take things in terms of recent discovery, like, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is about the primitive Christianity that only was discovered in 1947. They have an idea that there's going to be some great conflict between good and evil, and it's called the war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. It's presented more or less as a mystery. It's not clear what the author's driving at. And then you get these people in contemporary terms, realistic contemporary terms, talking about a jihad, a holy war. And you're seeing something that existed 2,000 years ago, even though it was only found in 1937, appearing to have a total reality with regard to a totally different religion. And so I just find I'm checkmated all the time, because I don't understand why so much evil is done in the name of an ultimate good.
The origin of everything we see in the world today, I mean, it has its roots. You need to go back to the time of the Crusades and the barbaric cruelty which the Crusaders inflicted upon followers of Islam, and the origin of the strife that we see. It has its origins in history, rooted in history. It's not coming out of the blue.
I think what we see in ISIS is an abhorrence of Islam, and any sort of true peace-loving Muslim would not use it. I don't think ISIS is remotely representative of any religion. I think it's crime at its worst, and it's put a name to.
They have nothing to do with true spirituality. It's an aberration. They hatred where there's hatred. I mean, they dress it up in their own ideology, but it has nothing to do with love, nothing to do with spirituality. Well, they're stirring up. They're stirring up a sort of conflict within Islam itself, between the Sunni and the Shia minorities, and ISIS are taking advantage of, in Syria they're taking advantage of the turbulence for their own ends. The roots of these things, it's poverty and resentment, social injustice. All these influences create the environment in which groups like ISIS can flourish. Where yes, I mean it's the resentment. Poverty creates resentment and is fueled by the lack of resources, or the Western powers, the scramble for
Northern
resources.
Ireland is another example where you've got the Catholics who
Where people get locked into their grievances, and where there isn't this broader tolerance, this broader understanding of the sacred nature of life and the essential unity of life,
But Syria was a sacred country. Syria, there were much different religions living in Syria.
of course.
They were turbulent.
Syria, I mean, the depths of spirituality in Syria, there's a strong elements of Sufism and great religious tolerance. Within all of these countries, the wisdom is there if you search for it.
Philip,
I think it's important to understand that there aren't any easy answers to these questions. Life on one level continues as it always has done, but insofar as each one of us can find our own ground of stability within our own consciousness, then we can contribute our own understanding to the outer scene, and in a small way this makes a difference. I mean, it may not appear to make a difference, but we each have a responsibility to live with integrity. And this creates a sort of groundswell of opinion that can change the way the outer world expresses itself. But it isn't the work of a moment, it's a lifetime. Spirituality is a lifetime's task, the work of a lifetime. And healing, spiritual healing, is not a patchwork affair. It's a total transformation of personality in light of deep understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just